Well, here we are. Another empty patch of space where a Legion homeworld used to be. Not far from the Sol system, this world, when it existed, was home to perhaps the greatest and most lauded of all legions. The Primarch of this legion was the first to be found by the Imperium, and would go on to rise to the highest honour and status. And yet, from the highest of heights come the longest of falls, and when the Legion turned to chaos, they became perhaps the most infamous and reviled. Today, they are fractured and splintered, though they are occasionally marshalled together as part of the Black Crusades launched by their Primarch's successor. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Chthoniya, a lawless world mined dry before the age of the Imperium and ruled by vicious gangs before its eventual death for reasons unknown. It was home to the 16th Legion Astartes, originally known as the Lunar Wolves. Their Primarch was the Warmaster Horus Lupercal, and by the time of the Horus heresy, they were called the Sons of Horus. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to Legions, a 40k Stories mini-series. There are almost no records of the 16th Legion before they rediscovered Horus on Chthoniya. It is said that a native of Chthoniya was among the first of them, having travelled to Terra by conventional means during the Unification Wars. Chthoniya was so close to Terra that the warp was not even necessary for travel between them. The original Terran contingent of the 16th were drawn from hunters in certain slums, vicious and independent, much like the Chthonians who would join them after the return of Horus. Coincidence? I think not. Their first, and probably only engagement, was the pacification of Lunar, the first Astartes engagement not fought on Terra itself, that also involved what would become the Ultramarines and Imperial Fists. It was a short battle, only lasting 6 hours or so, but in that time the 16th showed themselves as extremely effective with surgical strikes and shock and awe assaults. As reward, the 16th were given the lion's share of the gene seed created by the now enslaved artisans of Lunar, and recruitment squads were sent to Chthoniya in order for the supply to meet the demand. Eventually, these recruiters found the Primarch Horus, by which time the Legion was around 10,000 strong. Their unique recruiting method could have been to the Legion's detriment, as they never set up bases on Chthoniya and instead abducted worthy candidates to undergo the transformation into Astartes, but it turned out that all new members of the 16th were extremely loyal and driven. Not sure why, given the lawless nature of their former home. Maybe just some good gene seed. The Legion also earned the nickname of the Emperor's Wolves after the pacification of Lunar, and when Horus was found, the moniker was made official, as the Emperor christened the 16th as the Lunar Wolves. Horus Lupercal's origins are, perhaps surprisingly given his fame/infamy, surrounded in mystery. All we know is that he landed on Chthoniya when the Primarchs were scattered, and that he remained there until he was found/recruited by the Imperium. It is highly probable that he spent time amongst the populace and their gangs in order to show himself worthy of recruitment, but nothing is truly confirmed as he wasn't there for very long in the grand scheme of things. Some say that after his rediscovery, Horus and the Emperor were side by side almost permanently, whilst others claim Horus went to Terra to grow up first, before joining the Great Crusade as a full-grown adult. What is known is that the bond between Horus and his gene father were very strong, and the Lunar Wolves won much honour fighting as the personal guard to the two greatest humans in the Imperium at the time. Horus was a strategic and tactical genius, even compared to his brothers who were found later. Every battle minimised casualties amongst both the Astartes and any enemy innocents, but was always ruthless and clinical at defeating those who opposed the Emperor's will. He seemingly knew every legion inside out, as he always knew which force was appropriate to use in a particular engagement, and because of this, he was often given overall command of Imperial forces when the Emperor left to meet the other newly discovered Primarchs. The second Primarch to be discovered was in fact Leman Russ about 30 years after Horus, but Lupercal had already cemented his place as the firm favourite of their father. He even saved the Emperor's life on the world of Goro, as the Lord of Mankind was being choked to death by an Orc warlord until Horus hacked off his arm, to repay the debt of the Emperor saving his life on Raylis some time previously. If Horus did have a weakness at this time, it would be his pride, perhaps even arrogance, as he always aspired for himself and his legion to be the greatest of all, the ones the Emperor would always be proudest of. The Lunar Wolves during the Great Crusade gained great honour and reputation, both before and after the Emperor and Horus parted ways as more Primarchs popped up. They were, much like their Primarch, a very flexible force capable of tackling almost any situation. They were incredible warriors, of course, but they even functioned as diplomats if necessary, which I doubt many other Legion was capable of or skilled at. They also had a perhaps unique approach to any world they brought into compliance. Whereas the word-bearers would completely revolutionize a world's religion, Horus advocated participation in local customs, perhaps to show the world that the Imperium cared and to give his sons a measure of humanity, though the true reasons are unknown. This was how the warrior lodges came to be so prominent in the Lunar Wolves. A version had existed in the Legion from the beginning, as they apparently had in most legions, but after the original pacification of the world of Davin, it became much more important and eventually encompassed many senior officers, Horus included. As the Crusade rolled on, Horus continued to impress as a commander, but he also came to know and understand many of his brother Primarchs. He was closest with Sanguinius, but his loyalties became more solid following the most famous Lunar Wolves campaign, Ullanor. The Ullanor campaign saw the 16th crush the Orc Empire of Urlag-Urg via a clinical Terminator strike that saw the Warlord thrown off his own tower by the Primarch to break the Greenskins' resolve and effectively shatter the Orcs for the remainder of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. The Orcs never posed a major threat again until the War of the Beast in M32, and many in the Imperium believed they'd actually given up the ghost completely. Bloody idiots. Following Ullanor, the Emperor declared the Triumph of Ullanor, which brought 14 of the 18 Legion Astartes together to witness the ascension of Horus to Warmaster, overall military commander of the Great Crusade. There was a mixed response from the Primarchs present, but those who were most accepting, and thus those who Horus became closest to, were Sanguinius, Lorgar, Rogel Dawn, Fulgrim, and Mortarion. The Emperor also granted Horus with the Power Maul Worldbreaker, said to have been made by the Lord of Mankind himself, as well as the right to change his legion's name. Initially, Horus declined the name change, but following conflict with the Interrex, he took Sanguinius' advice and made the change, renaming the 16th as the Sons of Horus and altering both their colour scheme and insignia. The fall of Horus Lupercal began subconsciously, probably from the time of Ullanor when the Emperor returned to Terra to work on the Imperial Webway project. It is thought that the Emperor's supposed abandonment of his sons, along with the newly formed Council of Terra that managed the bureaucratic matters of the Imperium, planted some hidden corruption deep within the Warmaster that even he didn't recognise. Next came the death of Hosta Sejanus, one of the members of the Mournival that made up the honour guard of the Primarch, on the planet designated 6319. We'll discuss the Heresy-era Mournival a bit later. Horus took Sejanus' death extremely hard, having loved him like a true son and honour brother bonded over hundreds of worlds. Then, of course, was the now infamous pacification and policing action on the moon of Davin, when the Nurgle-corrupted planetary governor Eugen Temba was able to stab Horus with the Kinnebrak anatheme that had been gifted to him by the word-bearer's chaplain Erebus, who had stolen it from the Interrex. Horus was mortally wounded, and Erebus suggested he be taken to the Davinite Serpent Lodge in order to be healed, something the desperate and grieving Mournival reluctantly accepted. Horus was entombed, and whilst he slept, Erebus set about corrupting him. Masquerading as the spirit of Hosta Sejanus and empowered by a ritual of the cultists, the chaplain entered the Warmaster's dream and played on that hidden doubt, telling him of the warp magics used by the Emperor to create the Primarchs, along with visions of a future in which the Emperor was a god and the Primarchs were naught but cast-aside tools. Despite the warnings of Magnus the Red, who had sensed what was happening and projected his soul to stop it, Horus was turned against the Emperor and fell into the clutches of chaos even though he knew it was not in fact Sejanus stood before him. 3 days later, as promised by the cultists, Horus strode from the temple of the Serpent Lodge fully healed, and began setting his rebellion into motion. He used the campaign against the Auretian technocracy both to secure the support of the Martian Mechanicum and to identify any loyalists within his legion that had not been converted by the warrior lodges or loyalty to his Primarch. He also secured the loyalty of Angron, Mortarion and Fulgrim, as well as Perturabo, Alfarius and Conrad Kurz, before moving to reveal his treachery in the Istafan system. The Istafan Campaign began as a simple pacification action to put down secessionists who had tried to break from the Imperium, but it became the most infamous war in the Great Crusade and the opening act of the Horus Heresy. On Istafan III, the final battle took place in the Choral City, the capital of the world, led by former planetary governor Vardus Pral, who had been killing Imperials for around 6 years by the time Retribution arrived. Present were the Sons of Horus, the World Eaters, the Death Guard, and the Emperor's children, along with their Primarchs. Horus ordered a drop pod assault comprised of the elements of each legion considered to be loyal. In the case of the Sons of Horus, this force was led by Garviel Loken and Tarik Torgadan of the Mornival. Normally Stormbird gunships would have been used, but the Warmaster chose the drop pod method to ensure the Loyalists could not escape what was coming for them. Once everyone was deployed, Horus unleashed Life-Eater virus bombs and then a firestorm to exterminate those who would not follow him, but a warning from sole targets of the Emperor's children meant that elements survived. The remaining Loyalists of the 16th returned to being Lunar Wolves, abandoning their new name, and fought against the traitors, but were almost entirely exterminated. Horus did not come down to the surface, but instead remained in space in a vain attempt to salvage what was basically a disaster for his forces as they had to launch a costly ground invasion. The initial traitors then moved to Istafan 5 and were engaged by the Loyalists during what would become the Drop Site Massacre. Horus largely stayed out of the fighting again, but his legion was pitted against the Iron Hands and Raven Guard for the most part and led by the surviving Mornival members Horus Aximand and Izakal Abaddon. The Sons of Horus' individual acts are poorly documented, as the betrayal of the reserve forces in the battle between Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus seemingly took precedence, but it is known that at the end of the battle the Warmaster himself did deign to enter the fray, inflicting huge damage at the head of the elite Justarian Terminators of 1st Company. With the Loyalists dead or routed, Horus and co set the heresy into full swing, setting a course to overthrow their father, the Emperor. The actions of the Sons of Horus during the heresy were numerous and varied, securing resources, hunting down shattered legionaries who had fled Istafan 5, and aiding other traitor armies. They were not as successful as you may think, for they were defeated or held to a stalemate on numerous occasions by the Loyalists, despite having Horus himself present, as in the Battle of the Coronid Deeps. This engagement was never truly resolved during the heresy, as though the traitors made great strides in securing the region, they could never completely deal with the Loyalists and indeed suffered heavy losses throughout. Horus also survived more than one assassination attempt, both from agents of Malkador the Sigillite and the Astartes under Shadrach Medusan of the Iron Hands, but survived every time with seemingly no major injuries. On Malek, the bulk of the 16th was committed to the offensive against what seemed like a nothing world, but Horus's goal was not just to destroy the Loyalists. He sought to gain the powers of the Emperor, which he had been told about through an erased memory that could be accessed by a warp gate on Malek. The battle went the way of the traitors, with only a handful of Imperials and no Astartes actually escaping, but it was the warp gate that held the most importance. Horus strode through it and returned what had been, for his sons, only a few moments later. But the Primarch had actually been within the Immaterium from an unknown period of time and had visibly aged. He now had the powers he sought, despite having defied the gods to do it, and he now had a massive demonic army at his back, having taken what he wanted by force and then rejected what is believed to be ascension to demonhood. He then survived another infiltration leading to assassination attempt, this one from the Knights Errant led by the still-alive Garviel Loken and the Primarch Leman Russ, before finally marshalling his forces and driving toward the Sol System for the final confrontation with his father. The battles in the Sol System raged from Pluto all the way to Terra over several years, and became known as the Solar War. The contents of the various engagements are unknown, but the defence was organised by the Imperial Fists, so we shall cover it in more detail when we explore the Sons of Dawn. Eventually, the traitors did break through the various spears of defence and advanced on Terra, beginning the final act of the 9-year heresy. It started in 005 M31 on Istafan 3 and concluded in 014 M31 with the Siege of Terra. The battle was fierce, with the traitors slowly grinding the Emperor's armies back to the gates of the Imperial Palace and cutting them off from the rest of Terra, but it was all too slow. Whilst the current defenders were only 3 legions strong, the Ultramarines and Dark Angels were en route, and those forces could have been able to swing the battle through numbers and skill. The Ultramarines were the largest legion after all. As such, Horus was forced to play a dangerous gambit, lowering the shields of his flagship the Vengeful Spirit and baiting the Emperor to come and face him personally. The Imperials came, somehow scattered throughout the vessel, and Horus struck down the Blood Angel's Primarch Sanguinius, who refused at the last to join his rebellion. He then fought his father in a battle comparable to a duel of gods as opposed to men. The Emperor had been holding back as he believed that the Warmaster could still be saved, and suffered severe injuries including a crushed spine and lost arm as a result, but had his eyes opened when Horus destroyed either a custodian or the guardsman Alanius Pius with a whim as they tried to protect the Lord of Mankind. Accounts vary on who this individual was. Realizing now that Horus was too far gone, fully ensnared by the Chaos Gods, the Emperor launched a psychic blast that pierced the Warmaster's heart and drove the Chaos Gods from his body as they realized their pawn had failed. Horus came to see the monster he had become and begged his father to kill him before Chaos took hold of him again, and the Emperor obliged with almost the last of his strength, obliterating the mind of what had been his favoured son. The traitor assault faltered after Horus died, but First Captain Abaddon was able to secure the vengeful spirit from the loyalists who had yet to leave after Dawn evacuated the mortally wounded Emperor, and Abaddon would lead the Sons of Horus and the other traitors into the Eye of Terror. The 16th took the world of Malium as their own, and entombed the body of Horus with the utmost reverence in a fortress known as Lupercalios, but would end up splintering during the wars between the traitor legions that followed their flight into the Eye. Horus's body was stolen by the Emperor's children, and it took the return of Abaddon to bring any semblance of unity to what would become the Black Legion. And now, with the tale of the 16th told, it is time to explore some of the big names within the Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. The Mournival were the chief advisors of Horus Lupercal, 4 captains who carried no official authority outside of the Legion, but were considered to be the senior captains within it. They would be Horus's seconds on the battlefield, and would help with the shaping and execution of any battle plans or strategies. The Mournival's origins are disputed, with some believing they are as old as the Legion, but others saying they are a byproduct of the Warrior Lodge within the 16th. Note that non-Lodge members were still elected to the Mournival. When the heresy was revealed in Istafan 3, the Mournival was divided in two, as 2 captains stood loyal and 2 followed Horus. The loyalist members were Garviel Loken and Tarik Torgadan, 10th and 2nd captains respectively. Torgadan had been a long-standing member of the Mournival, having been part of the group from its first confirmed appearance in 970 M30. That doesn't mean he was a founding member, however, as there have been at least 6 other members who cannot be placed in the timeline. He was the one to recommend Loken to the Mournival, and the two became firm friends. Following the injury of Horus, Torgadan and Loken justifiably, in fact, opposed the internment of the Warmaster into the Serpent Lodge, and Torgadan actually left the Warrior Lodge of the 16th after arguments over what action to take against fleet humans angry at the Astartes for killing other humans while stricken with grief. Loken, by comparison, never joined the lodges, even though his opinion of them was tempered by Torgadan. The 10th captain was also the first Astartes in the Mournival who wasn't a Son of Horus, an old moniker from the time of the Lunar Wolves for Marines who bore a resemblance to the Primarch's likeness as a cause of their gene seed. The two would be rooted out as loyalists, assumedly after their confrontation of Erebus over the Kinnebrach anatheme found on Davin, and were thus damned to die on Istafan 3. Both survived. Well, sort of. Torgadan would eat his end at the hand of Horus Aximand, one of the traitorous Mournival members, and his gene seed would later be sacrificed to summon the demon Tormageddon, who perhaps possessed the body of the second captain for a time. This would accidentally also resurrect part of Torgadan's soul, who would find its way to his fellow loyalist. Loken was seemingly the sole Astartes to properly survive Istafan 3, but was gravely wounded by Abaddon and caught in Horus's last orbital bombardment. He survived, but lost his sanity, at least until he was recruited into the Knight Errant by Nathaniel Garrow, who appealed to his sense of duty and overcame the madness of what he thought was the last loyalist. After a mission investigating the Dark Angel's loyalties and almost recruiting Cypher, Loken abandoned the Knights for a time and went into seclusion, but was visited by the spirit fragment of Torgadan. The second captain reminded the 10th one of his oath taken when he joined the Mournival, to serve the Emperor and Imperium above all else. Reinvigorated, Loken rejoined the Knights for the mission on Molech, and was blown into space as the Knights Errant attacked the vengeful spirit after his capture, but survived. His fate is unknown, along with many Knights Errant, but it is thought that either he or the Lunar Wolf Severian was a founding Grandmaster of the Grey Knights killed at some time later by Abaddon. I suspect Severian because he is stated to be a latent Psyker, leaving Loken's fate still a mystery. Whilst 2 of the Mournival stayed loyal to the Emperor, 2 turned traitor. First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon and 5th Captain Horus Aximand, and also I know I pronounced Abaddon's name weird, deal with it. Abaddon was a brutal legend even among Chthonians before he was recruited into the Legion. He rose to the rank of First Captain and was in awe/adoration of his Primarch. It was rumoured by some that Abaddon was in fact a clone of Horus, but this would clash with the origin story that we know. Abaddon accompanied Horus in his bodyguard in the final battle on Ullanor, and was the only one of the 10 Terminators guarding the Primarch who survived the battle with Erlag's 40-strong bodyguard, whilst the Warmaster-to-be dealt with the Warlord. He was pretty much the first to throw his lot in with Horus when the heresy was revealed, perhaps unsurprisingly, and travelled down to Istafan III after the virus bombing to deal with the surviving loyalists. He fought against Loken, defeating the Lunar Wolf with relative ease. Admittedly, he was wearing Terminator armour and Loken had nothing but a chainsword, so it was hardly a fair fight. On Terra, Abaddon was not present for the duel between Horus and the Emperor, as he was dealing with the Imperial fists aboard the Vengeful Spirit, but he was able to claim his father's body whilst cleansing the vessel of loyalists before retreating. He then abandoned the Legion entirely, taking the flagship with him, but would eventually return to destroy Fabius Bile's Horus clones, cast aside the shadow of his father, and rename the 16th as the Black Legion, before launching the Long War as the new Warmaster. I've covered Abaddon in more detail elsewhere, so look that up if you want to know more about him. As for Horus Aximand, he bore an incredibly striking resemblance to Horus Lupercal, more than any of the other Sons of Horus, to the point where he was nicknamed Little Horus by his brothers. He was a more recent addition to the Mournival, not part of the first group we know of, but still a member before Loken. He then travelled down to Istafan III with Abaddon and slew Tarik Torgaddon, but his decision was not a simple one, and clearly had a profound effect on Aximand. He was seemingly forced to suppress his logical personality, and when he was next seen fighting on Istafan V, he was almost mechanical in his motions. He was wounded twice on the planet of Dwell, first by a White Scar, and then by the forces of Shajak Medusan as they attempted to kill Horus. He finally put doubts to bed over his choice to betray when the Knights Errant came to Molech, fighting Loken and co. on the Vengeful Spirit. He had actually dreamed of Loken, but believed him to be dead, so it must have been a bit of a shock. His fate is currently unknown, as he was not seen on Terra or Malium, nor at the side of Abaddon, so I assume he died during the heresy. Either that, or his doubts resurfaced and he abandoned the Legion. At some time between Istafan and Molech, Abaddon and Aximand came to elect Falcus Kyber and Grail Noctua to the next Mournival, formed on the suggestion of Little Horus. The latter would be killed by Severian and then possessed by Tormageddon, whilst the former would be the one to seek out Abaddon and the Vengeful Spirit after the theft of Horus's body. Whilst the Mournival duelled on Istafan III, one Lunar Wolf was able to escape from the fleet. Iacton Cruz, captain of the 3rd Company and a veteran from the Unification Wars. He wasn't a Terran, so must have been one of, if not the first Chthonian in the Legion. Opinions on Cruz seem to be divided, as he was apparently considered as a Mournival member after the death of Hosta Jonas, but others wanted him dropped from the command structure altogether for his overly serious nature and extremely long-winded opinions. He was also nicknamed the Half-Herd, though the reasons why are unknown. It's not stated his vocal cords were damaged, though it could be because other legionaries chose to ignore his ramblings for some reason. Whatever the case, Cruz remained loyal like many other Terrans would do when the heresy broke out, but unlike almost everyone else, he got away. Rescuing the Remembrancer Euphrati Keeler, who would go on to become a living saint, amongst others, Cruz commandeered a Thunderhawk and fled the Vengeful Spirit, joining up with the frigate the Eisenstein, commanded by Nathaniel Garrow of the Death Guard, before their flight from Istvan. They escaped and were rescued, then arrested by Rogel Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists. Eventually, they were brought before Malcador the Sigillite on Lunar, and were formed into the origins of the Inquisition, as well as the Knights Errant. Cruz himself was an agent of the Sigillite, travelling to Titan to investigate the Remembrancer Solomon Voss, who had been documenting the actions of the traitors at Horus's command. He then seemingly transferred to the Knights Errant, working with Loken to investigate the Dark Angels on Caliban. Loken nearly killed Cruz just before they set out to infiltrate the Vengeful Spirit over another Remembrancer, Mercedes Arleton, who the 10th Captain had seemingly fallen in love with. Well, sort of. I don't know if Space Marines can do that. It was the only word he could think of, so, okay. And who Cruz had said was dead, when in fact she was a prisoner on Titan. Permanently. Stopped by Tylos Rubio and Mesa Varon, two of the other knights errant who I'm sure we'll cover later, the two reconciled in some way and went to Molech with the other knights, but were captured and brought before Horus. The Warmaster offered Loken a place back within the Sons of Horus Legion, but he refused, and a fight broke out. Cruz was killed, impaled on the Talon of Horus, a weapon crafted for the Warmaster by Kelbor Hal, the leader of the Dark Mechanicum. The death of the half-herd finally snapped any shred of allegiance Loken might have had for Horus, earning the Primarch instead his eternal hatred. The 18th and 19th companies of the Sons of Horus, at least during the Crusade era, were led by the captains Tybalt Ma and Verilam Moy. Both of them were Sons of Horus, with the similar facial features to the Primarch, but the pair were so similar as to be near interchangeable. It surprises me that this wasn't more common amongst the 16th, given that you could only be so dissimilar from the others who all looked like the Primarch in some way, and the Legion numbered around 150,000 at one point. In fact, the two were so indistinguishable that they were nicknamed the Either and the Or, assigned to Ma and Moy respectively, and their companies would be paired up on campaign whenever possible. Lots were drawn when less companies than the total present were needed, so this didn't always happen. One of the occasions of separation would be that fateful return to Davin and the battle on its moon with Yugen Temba's forces. The 19th were sent down and were the first into the corrupted governor's fallen flagship. Moy would be the first to discover Temba and was killed, assumedly with the anatheme, when he refused to fall to chaos. With the Or dead, the Either fell into what could be considered depression if Astartes feel that, particularly after visiting the site of his Lightness's death. Ma did recover though, joining the warrior lodges just before the heresy broke out, despite refusing to for so long whilst Moy was alive and an active member. Ma would go on to attack the fleet-fleeing Istafan V that included Shadrach Medusan in the Battle of Arisak, and the Iron Hand promised the Either that he would take the Son of Horus's head. Whether he would achieve this goal, however, remains unknown, for after the Battle of Dwell and Medusan's flight, it was Tybalt Ma who received command of the Sons of Horus fleet sent to pursue them. Nothing was heard of either force again, for Medusan's next appearance was in fact Alpharius in disguise, and so the fate of the Either remains a mystery, though I suspect he will be dead by now, either because of Medusan or because of the great scouring that would follow the Horus heresy. So end the tales of the Lunar Wolves and the Sons of Horus. Whilst the 16th Legion were undoubtedly the poster boys and probably the most powerful legion in the Great Crusade, they and their Primarch were seduced by the Dark Gods and fell to chaos. They now stand as a broken legion dishonoured by its past, held together by the will of its former first captain and not much else, but the traits and tactics will still hold echoes of the former Warmaster. I hope you enjoyed the fourth part of Legions, our mini-series looking into the mighty Legion Astartes and their heroes. Next time on 40k Stories, we'll be travelling to the former home of another Chaos Warband, looking at their leader and roots. I hope you can join me then as we head to the Maelstrom to catalogue the tale of the Astral Claws, now better known as the Red Corsairs, and their leader Huron Blackheart. Thank you all for watching. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.